Hello and welcome to the Student Development Top Tips for your CV. Tip number 1, tailor your CV. Gone are the days where you can have just one CV that you can send to all employers, even within the same sector or industry. You need to tailor each CV to the specific job that you're applying for. You could produce a really great master copy that you then just need to tweak for each application. The employer needs to see that you have taken into account the skills and specifications that they are seeking. So, in your employment history, for example, don't be afraid to alter your bullet points or sentences so that they appeal to that particular employer. Use the personal spec where provided and make sure that you try to mention as many of the points as possible. Make sure everything you tell them is relevant to the role. You can even lift keywords that the employer uses. So if they want people who are able to create, make sure you change a sentence like developed a database to something more like created a database. Tip 2. Be specific. If you're going to go to all the effort of tailoring each CV that you use, you need to follow that up by being specific. In your work history, for example, don't just say that you served customers during your part-time work in a pub. Say something like you were responsible for serving customers, which helped improve your communication skills, especially when busy and working under pressure. This isn't necessarily a perfect example, but detail specific duties and skills and show what you learned or developed. Tip 3. Consider a skills section. Skills sections are becoming more and more popular on CVs, especially as competition for jobs and a necessity to stand out from the crowd increases. To create a skills section, the first tip will be worth remembering. Tailor this section. So pick out a couple of skills, 3 is quite common, that the employer specifically asks for. If making a speculative application, do your research and find out what skills they will be looking for. Then you simply need to tell us a bit about how you can demonstrate that you possess this skill. So the second tip is also useful here. Be specific. If the key skill you have picked is, say, leadership, it's not enough to tell us, I led a team during my volunteer work at Help the Aged. You need to demonstrate that you understand leadership, so provide specific examples. As the team leader, I prioritise our tasks and then delegated jobs out to the team based on their strengths and weaknesses. Again, this is just an example, but already you are showing that not only do you understand what leadership is, you're able to point to specific examples. Tip 4. Use sections and titles wisely. Most people would probably agree that it's best to have more sections in your CV than to lump lots of different things under a more generic title. So don't be worried about having sections called positions of responsibility, clubs, societies, and separate voluntary work sections. Just choose a name that adequately describes the content. This is much better than having a section called Other Experience that may include your involvement with societies, volunteering, and interests. Tip 5. Use all of your CV. I very often come across CVs that have a great work history or employment section with some really good use of keywords like managed, developed, produced, that are specific and relevant and all the things that we want to be. But then we come to the sections mentioned in the last point, such as volunteer work, societies, clubs, and suddenly we just have a list. Use all these experiences as you would your employment history or skills section. So tell us the why, where, whens. Talk about the skills you developed and used, even in your interest section. So instead of just saying you play football on the local team, give us that you help the captain organise fixtures or you use your communication skills to help motivate the rest of the team. Every section in your CV should give a nod to your skill set, not just your work history. Tip number 6, avoid personal information. There's really no need these days to list anything other than your name, which, by the way, I would use as a title for the document, and your address, telephone number and email. You absolutely do not need to detail your age or date of birth, your gender, your relationship status, your religion. Also, don't include a photo. Even though it's quite common in some countries, UK-style CVs shouldn't include one. Keep your details to the top of the first document and they probably shouldn't take up more than a few lines. Tip number 7, be consistent. Although the layout and look of your CV alone won't be enough to secure an interview, it shouldn't be underestimated how important it can be. Employers will make a decision in a matter of seconds about whether they're going to read your CV, let alone consider you for the role. So make sure that your CV is well laid out. The key to this for me is to be consistent. So if your titles are in bold, make sure they all are. If you leave a line between each section, follow this through. Stick to one font and size throughout, and don't try and pack too much information into each section. Avoid large chunks of text. I guarantee it won't be read. Tip number 8, be concise. Unless specifically asked, it's generally expected that a UK-style CV should be 2 pages long. The only exception to this may be if you're applying for a post as an academic and you need to include things like conferences and publications. Be concise within your CV too. As mentioned in the last point, long chunks of text probably won't get read. Stick to short, concise bullet points. Tip number 9, spelling and grammar. Spelling and grammar mistakes will always be frowned upon, but in a competitive graduate market, it can be just the excuse an employer needs to get a huge amount of applications down to a handful. Don't make silly mistakes. Tip number 10, don't stand out for the wrong reasons. I have a lot of students ask me how to make their CV stand out. It's a good question, but the answer is possibly seen as a bit of a dull response. You make your CV stand out by being specific, by tailoring it, by being consistent, basically by following all of the tips that we've discussed today. You do not want to stand out for the wrong reasons, so don't use coloured paper, don't include images, don't use silly fonts. These kind of things will make you stand out, but not in the way that you want. So there we have it, the student development top tips for your CV. This is just a starting point, and you can find much more information on CVs along with cover letters and personal statements, etc. on our website www.le.ac.uk/student development, or you could always give our help desk a call if you'd like to book an appointment to see somebody face to face.